Who is likely to succeed the late President Michael Sata in Zambia? And why was there such a low turnout during Zambia's by-elections? What is the current political mood like in Zambia? And are the Zambian elections free and fair? What time is it? It's question time. Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Mpho Tsedu. The Southern African Development Community, that is SADC, its observer mission has endorsed Zambia's presidential election as credible. On Tuesday, Zambians went to the polls in a special election to choose a new president to replace the late Michael Sata, who died on 28 October 2014. Even though the voter turnout has been considerably low, many braved the heavy rain and voting continued into its third day today. Edgar Lungu from the ruling Patriotic Front has taken a slim lead over his rival Hakainde Hichilema. This after more than half the votes were counted. To discuss this, we are now joined in Lusaka by SABC contributing editor Vuyo Mvoko, who is covering the presidential elections there. In studio, my guests are Judy Smith-Horn, political analyst, and Joe Kawimbe, who is a Zambian national and an analyst as well. Vuyo, welcome to Question Time. What is the mood like? Has voting ended so far?
Well, Mpho, as you can imagine, everyone is anxious now because the outcome is what everyone is looking forward to. People had thought that by now things would not quite be where they are, but be that as it may, everyone has had to accept that there were certain things that no one could have done anything about. Mother Nature didn't play ball, well, not in the manner that people would have expected. But of course, everyone agrees that given a choice, Zambians would not be holding an election right in the middle of the rainy season. But then President Sata died about 3 months ago or so. And as the constitution of this country provides, an election has to be held within 90 days. So here they are. They had to hold an election, raining or not. But yesterday, you will recall, the Electoral Commission suspended releasing the interim results. The argument being you cannot be releasing the outcome of the election while other people haven't even voted. Reluctantly, parties had to accept that argument, and the Electoral Commission indeed, there was a lull. In other words, we didn't get any information up until around 10:30 this morning. At about 10:30 this morning, the outcome you were talking about is what was put before Zambians and indeed before the world. Edgar Lungu is the front runner with just over 50% of the votes counted so far. And Mr. Hichilema is not too far behind with just over 45% of the votes counted so far. They have just gone over, this was like 3 hours ago or so, they had just gone over the 50% mark. They had counted about 80 constituencies. They are still left with about 70 or so. So there's still a lot of work ahead, but the two gentlemen have already distinguished themselves. I think there's doubt whether anyone will ever be able to catch up.
Are there any chances, in fact, Vuyo, of, I think, HH perhaps upsetting Mr. Lungu there in terms of the results?
From people who have an intense and a deep knowledge of this country, they believe that it is still possible. Because they believe that some of the constituencies that are yet to be counted, verified, and so on are yet to sort of submit, or their results are yet to come through the system. So that possibility remains. But of course, it depends on who you are speaking to. Yeah. Because if you speak to people who are pro Mr. Lungu, they tell you that from this point onwards, there's no turning back. He is going to be the winner. And of course, yesterday there was a lot of speculation, a lot of conspiracy theories as well. Perhaps I should add that people are going to be surprised because HH, as Mr. Hichilema is fondly known, will actually take this election, albeit with a narrow margin. But some of the arguments that were being presented actually defy logic, because you cannot realistically talk about numbers when in fact there are so many when there are so many constituencies that are yet to submit their results. But do remember, and I must underline this, do remember that it is a transparent process even before the Electoral Commission itself announces the results, because at the polling station there are party representatives, and the two parties, the front runners, have party representatives in virtually every polling station. Yes. So when people vote, right, and when the counting is done, those party representatives are at the polling station. They are there when the numbers are counted, and they have to sign off whatever outcome. And if there's a recounting that needs to be done, they have to order it there, and they are witnesses to that. So a party that has like the large footprint, like the two front contenders, does or should have a sense by now as to how it has fared. So the speculation may not be altogether sort of out of sync with the reality that we will hear of a little later on. Mpo?
A very quick one, Vuyo. This is an abnormal situation where, I mean, people have to be suspended. They have to live in suspense of knowing the outcome. I mean, the voting has not ended. The counting clearly has not ended as well. How are they taking it? And I'm talking about the ordinary people on the streets there.
Well, ordinary people are anxious. I mean, on our way here, going past the garage, speaking to people on the ground, everyone wants to know. Even the waiters at the hotel, like whenever we're talking, they're like, what's going on now? Where are things now? Because everyone is anxious for an outcome, because it had been predicted that it's going to be a tight one. So everyone, obviously from different vantage points, is anxious to know the outcome. But generally, even though yesterday the mood was different because people were suspicious. In fact, it's one of the things that the Commission highlighted this morning, saying the levels of suspicion that are out there are just incredible. And that is something that has not set down well, that has not gone down well with the Commission. But be that as may, the Commission said there was nothing that they could do, but they have played catch up. And if you listened to leaders of the various political parties this morning, the tone was a lot different from what you were hearing yesterday when people were told that there wasn't going to be, in other words, there was a suspension of the release of interim results. People are accepting now that the conditions within which the Commission had to operate were beyond their control. And you are hearing everyone now saying the Commission has actually done very well, and they are all now rallying behind it. Be that as it may, they are still anxious. They do want an outcome, and they want it like yesterday.
Vuyo Mvoko, thank you very much for giving us that update. For now, we're going to take a quick break. When we return, we'll continue with the discussion. This is Question Time. Please don't go away.
Cameroon's economic capital, a unique art collection is on display. Titled Yesterday's Memory, Tomorrow's Memory.
We are trying to preserve this heritage despite many things that have changed in the designing, embroidery and the model.
If I'm telling you, you don't like it, I call it defeat.
Join Musam Khalifi on Afro Showbiz every Saturday at 19:30 CAT. Zoom into Africa. This is Senegal. The president is Mr. Macky Sall. Senegal withdrew from the Mali Federation on 20 August in 1960. The population is more than 13 million people. One of the major languages spoken is French. Monetary unit is CFA.
Welcome back. You're still watching Question Time. I'm now joined by Judith Smith-Horn. She's a political analyst, and Joe Kawimbe is a Zambian national. Welcome to the show, and welcome once again, Judy. Joe, here you are in what is supposed to be foreign soil, and in fact, not necessarily. We are one Africa. One Zambia, one nation, went to the polls, results not out yet. How are you feeling?
Oh, Paul, this is very dramatic and extremely anticlimactic. Yeah. You know, these are the first elections that have been so dramatic in Zambia. Yeah. We've never had a situation where there's been so much happening. Initially, it should have been a foregone conclusion had there been no dramas happening in the PF government. Yes. Because there would have been very sure of the strengths. But then when the infighting started, we began doubting whether the ruling party had it right. Yes. Because we knew that in the background, the opposition were regrouping, yes, while they are still fighting for leadership. Yes. But God willing, as Kaunda would say, they came out with one voice. Now here's HH. He has really been an inspiration to a lot of young people, and he has given the PF a run for their money. Yes. But we don't know where it's going now. It's too close to call, as we has just said. Yeah. Mm.
Now, you have a lawyer facing an economist here, Judy. Who is likely to appeal more to this constituency of Zambia?
Well, I guess it depends on who you're talking about. If you're talking about the mining companies, for example, the private sector, yes, you would potentially say that HH is more appealing simply because he's a businessman. He came out very early saying that he was going to re-look at those taxations, the mining taxations and those sorts of things. And of course, Edgar Lungu, a slightly more populist, yes, had certainly said, you know, he hadn't necessarily made a point earlier on, maybe a week ago, but I do think what's been very interesting, not necessarily interesting, but very typical for Zambian politics, especially if you consider previous elections. This is not the first time that an incumbent is that somebody's being elected following the death of a president. Yes. This is the second time it's happening, and also the way that the political parties have maneuvered are also very similar. You find the factionalization within the PF, yes, and within the MMD, but what's very typical is that you suddenly now have the MMD one part of the MMD under former President Rupiah Banda backing Edgar Lungu, the PF, yes, and one would necessarily, you know, you might raise questions about that, but the reality is that's happened before.
Well, here, these are quite popular figures, and like you're saying, Lungu is a populist, you know, tells the people what they want to hear, and they love him for that. HH, an economist who would, you know, consider, like you're saying, business interest as well. Now, let's look at the two gentlemen, you know, and do perhaps a SWOT analysis. Look at Lungu's strengths.
He appeals to the working class. certainly. I can't look in a glass bowl, right? I mean, a glass bowl, I can't necessarily... I would also never hedge my bets about who it's... I would never say who I think is more likely to come out on top.
No,
but I definitely think...
I
think the strengths and weaknesses is that the Patriotic Front has generally, historically, always appealed to the copper belt, to the working class, the people living in the copper belt. HH has appealed very much to the youth population, for example, and also to the middle classes. Michael Sata at the time was actually a unifying force within the PF, and we saw that very clearly following his death and how the PF then suddenly split between Guy Scott and Edgar Lungu factions, so to say. But maybe I don't know if you'd want to add to that, but I think HH, he's a very charming, very charismatic leader, and if you compare his results to the previous election, where he scored very low compared to the other two presidential candidates, he's done remarkably well, scoring just under half, just under I think just over 40%, I think was the latest. Well, it might point to what's going to happen in 19 months' time when the actual election was scheduled to take place.
Perhaps then the onus lies on you in this instance. Let's talk about, the disadvantages or the cons on both the leaders, and start with Lungu.
Well, Lungu is very interesting. When the two leaders were being asked what their vision was, it is said that Lungu said, "I have no vision except to continue where President Sata left off." And then, of course, HH has got his own vision about running, the country like a business, and he will be the CEO.
But let me just interject here. Don't you think it was safe for Lungu to say, "I have no vision except..."
Yes, of course. Because it was safe for him.
Because
it's the only
this is the last man who won elections.
Exactly.
And it would be, for a politician, you would rather identify with the person who had won elections and, tap into his popularity.
And exactly, I agree with you. Yeah. You see, that's a trick he played. Because if the moment you say that, then the crowd that had brought Michael Sata into office would remain with you.
Yes.
You see, he was betting on that. Because if he had said, "I've got my own vision," then people were going to begin analyzing and say, "Excuse me, we only have 19 months, and what vision is this?"
Yes.
So this is it. But then, now, the question is this. What was Michael Sata's vision? And was it the best for the country?
Yes.
This you should measure against what HH is bringing into office. Should he come into office?
Yes.
He's talking about running the country as a business, with proper accountability and, inviting investors. So the two must be measured together. If people believe that Michael Sata's vision was the best, then Lungu is safe. On the other hand, what I've seen is that the younger people have tended to sway towards HH, which is why a few young politicians from the PF and MMD actually crossed over and began supporting him.
Okay.
But then, how are the numbers?
All right, hold that thought there. I want us to talk about, after the break, how both these gentlemen can change the lives of one Mrs. Piri in Katete. This is Question Time.
we, you ask? This is who we are.
We are technologically driven.
We are unashamedly Afrocentric.
We advise you not only on legal matters,
but on health issues as well.
We bring imagination to life.
We celebrate arts and culture and lifestyle.
We tackle life challenges head on.
We dig deep. We probe. We question.
We invite you to take a view from our house, as we tell it without fear, separating fiction from factual.
We are the SABC News Channel.
All news, all global, all the time.
On the morning of the 21st of February 1917, their ship was rammed by a liner. Legend has it that as the Mendi was going down, members of the 5th Battalion danced barefoot aboard the vessel. 616 died that day, most of them black.
After the rapid food security assessment that was done together with WFP and FAO, we found that this is one of the heavily impacted areas because of Ebola.
Over 300 bikers from across the province making a difference in the fight against blood-related cancer.
I'm here in support of cancer, and my sister has cancer, so I'm riding for cancer.
Catch all news locally and internationally. Tune into SABC, your #1 news channel. News at 8 from Monday to Sunday.
Welcome back. You're still watching Question Time. My guest today, Judy Smith-Horn. She's a political analyst, and Joe Kawimbe is a Zambian national. Like I said, let's look at somebody in Katete. How would the life of that woman who's got no access to medical facilities, hospitalization, or anything of that sort be affected by the presence in office of these two gentlemen?
Well, I guess with H8 it's difficult to say, simply because his party has never been in that position before and governed. I think what definitely speaks for him is the fact that he's promised to diversify the economy, an economy that is reliant on the copper industry. Over-reliant on the copper industry. 70% of its revenues come from the copper industry. And with a falling copper price, that's likely to affect the economy negatively in the short to medium term, most certainly. So I think in terms of if one looks at it from that if one takes a step back and depersonalizes it, then certainly HH does stand a very good chance. I think an interesting thing as well with Edgar Lungu is that he's softened his stance on just before Michael Sata passed away, the former president passed away, they had passed a taxation bill on mining companies where the blanket tax of 6% was going to be raised to open-end mines to 20% and to 8% for other types of mining, and that caused a huge outcry amongst the private sector, of course, saying that they wouldn't be able to hold it, etc., etc. But it was very popular with Zambians, understandably so. So the question is really going to be, and it's hard to say right now, the question is going to be what's going to happen if Edgar Lungu does remain in power, if the PF does remain in power, if he is the president, will he still maintain that, and will they be able to take in those revenues to actually meet up the deficits? I think the problem in Zambia is that still around 2/3 of the population live below the poverty line, and that hasn't changed regardless of which party's been in power. So if any of the ones before remain in power, it's anyone's guess, really.
Yeah, and with around 60% of the population living in the rural areas or underdeveloped areas, what becomes the #1 item on the to-do list of the incoming president?
Whoever comes into office this week or tomorrow perhaps must remember that they'll be in office for only 19 months. And most likely they'll be wishing that in the coming 5 years they must be in office. So they've got a race here. And they must make sure they put their mouths, their money where their mouths are. You see, I go into Zambia very frequently, and in the rural areas, people live very poorly.
Yes.
So whoever it is, should not pay lip service. Now we hear about peasant farmers. They haven't been paid their money for a long time. But I know that towards campaign time, there was a scramble to pay them. Why during campaign only? So whoever it is must make sure he goes into the rural areas. He must ensure that the people out there, are given the basic necessities. People there, they're using pit latrines up to now. Most of them have got no piped water. You'd cry if you go into some of the villages.
Yes.
So whoever it is must go out there. And because, you see, they go into the rural areas. Even now, we're talking about 70 constituencies which haven't been counted yet.
Yeah.
And, and these, most of them are in the rural areas.
Yes.
So now, these are the same people who have been neglected. So this is why, whoever it is, if he wins now, he must go back there and say thank you by providing for those people. The peasant farmers, make sure that they have the basic facilities, I know employment is very difficult. They must take back, industries. During Kaunda's days, every rural area had a factory of some sort. And these were all shut down during Chiluba's time. So there's massive unemployment there. They should try and develop the rural areas, whoever it is who comes into power. And they'll be assured of a comeback.
Now, do you worry yourself with the fact that you've got this 4.7 billion debt, which was increased by like 32%, and a faltering kwacha currency in this 19 months? Or do you worry yourself about what happens after 19 months? I want to be in office after 19 months.
Well, again, if one takes a look back at how political players have behaved and how they've made their policy decisions, it's always been about career ambitions and less so about promoting development. Not to sound cynical, but I do think that a lot of that it's important that you need to have that change, but the reality would more likely be that it would be about garnering and making sure that you get elected the next time and doing whatever it takes. I mean, when Michael Sato was elected into power, public spending on civil servants rose by manyfold. So I think that's something one also will have to take into consideration, looking at what's going to happen over the next 19 months.
I mean, I don't think that, the incoming president is really going to rest and focus. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, I think it will be about making sure that he gets elected again in 19 months.
So what do you think?
Well, it's a tricky one. But you see, you talk about survival. You wish to survive. You know, that office is very sweet. You test it for a little while, you want more. So I know there are other issues there. They love to, of course, you have a country to run. For example, HH, he's an economist.
Yeah.
If he managed to get into office, we'd expect that, he would work out his mathematics well enough, to balance the act with investors and whatever. But then at the same time, he must take care of the people.
Okay. Just keep it there. Thank you very much. We've run out of time, unfortunately. But that was question time for today, and we wish the people of Zambia the best. Have yourself a wonderful time. Goodbye.